Okay, Boker Tov. Good morning. Today's daf yomi is Bava Metzia daf Pei Beis Bava Metzia 82. We're on the bottom of Pei Aleph Amar Beis 81b at the two dots, 7 lines from the bottom. So our Mishnah had said Halveo al Mashko, and that if you lend somebody money and they gave you a collateral, then you're considered to be a shomer sachar, a paid watchman, because presumably the person doesn't pay up, you can take their mashkal. So therefore, you're considered a shomer sachar. That's what our Mishnah says. The Luke Rebbe Eliezer. So our Mishnah, which says that if you're watching this mashkal, you're a shomer sachar. Let's say our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Eliezer, because the Brisa says, Tanya malvas chavera al mashkal v'avad mashkal. Let's say you're Let's say you're watching, you loaned your friend money on a collateral, and then you lost the collateral. Then you can take an oath, presumably that you weren't negligent, and then take your money. So this is the position of Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer doesn't view him as a shomer sachar, but views him as a shomer chinam. So it must be that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva Amar Yachol Omer Lo, that the mashkon, that the malvek could always say to the lovek, Kum helvisani el al mashkon. So the borrower could say to the lender, the only reason why you lent me the money was because of the mashkon. Avad mashkon avdu ma'osecha. You lost your mashkon, therefore you lose your money. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva views him as a shomer sachar. Aval helvio, but then the Brisa continues, but if he lent him elav zuz bishtar, but if he lent him 1,000 zuz with a contract, meaning to say that that the contract proves that there was a loan and the contract puts a lien on the real estate, and he put a collateral on top of them, there for sure, the mashkon is not a proof that there is a loan, which was the position of Rabbi Eliezer, that the mashkon is just proving that there was a loan, but rather the purpose of the mashkon is for collection. So therefore, if there's a contract and you lose the mashkon, then for sure, under those circumstances, you lose the mashkon, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara says, so doesn't it seem clear that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer? Because our Mishnah says that the lender is a shomer sachar on the mashkon, and Rabbi Eliezer says he's a shomer chinam. Gemara says, no, afilu tema Rabbi Eliezer. You could even say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Eliezer. You could even suggest that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Eliezer. Okasha, kan shemashkeno b'shas alva, kan shemashkeno shelo b'shas alva. Depends when he gave the mashkon to him. If he gave the mashkon during the time of the loan, then Rabbi Eliezer could say, that's when Rabbi Eliezer would say he's a shomer chinam, he's an unpaid watchman. And our Mishnah is talking about a case where he gave it to him when it was not during the time of the loan. It was later on when he came and he made his claim in the court. And so therefore, he hadn't paid him. So he gave him the mashkon on the basis of the court. So that's for sure not to remind us of the loan because we have a court record of it. So rather, it's just to be able to collect. And so therefore, if in that case, if he loses the mashkon, he loses the money. Mara says it can't be that that's the case. But both the Mishnah and the Brisa say hilvo al mashkon katani. Say he lent him the money on a mashkon, which means that the mashkon was at the time of the loan, and still the Mishnah says that he's a shomer sachar, he's responsible. Rabbi Eliezer says he's not. So we can't give that answer. So how do we explain that? Or do we really have to say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer? Or kasha on top of 82, at the top. Kan shalvil mos, kan shalvil peros. It depends what he has lent him, says the Mishnah, the Gemara, the next approach. In the case of our Mishnah, he lent him fruits, and fruits he's going to be considered like a paid watchman, because when he lends him the fruits, he's going to get back new fruits. But if he lends him money, then he's an unpaid watchman, because his money doesn't rot. And so therefore he's an unpaid watchman. So that in that circumstance, the Gemara says, can't be. Hamidiktani safe, but from the fact that the next clause of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda says, although most that if he lent him money, shomer chinam, then he's an unpaid watchman. Although peros, he's a shomer sachar, and if he lent him fruits, he's a shomer sachar. Means the next line in the Mishnah draws that exact distinction. Miklal, this proves the Tanakama lo shanile. The Tanakama himself doesn't draw a distinction between whether or not you lent him fruits or money. Then in both cases, he's a shomer sachar. So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. Kua Rabbi Yehuda the entire Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, v'chisure mechsera. And according to this approach, we have to say that the entire Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. It's just missing some words which we have to fill in. It's missing words. This is how we read our Mishnah. Or if he lends him money on the basis of a mashkon, then we're going to say he's a paid watchman. That's if he had lent him fruits, where the fruits, he's getting some benefit, the lender, because otherwise they would rot, and now he's lending him out, he's going to get good fruits back. But if you lent him money, then we're going to say shomer chinam. If you lent him money, then we're going to say he's an unpaid watchman. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Alval mos shomer chinam, alval pera shomer sachar." So, according to this approach, we want to say the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Well, if that's the case, if we're saying that the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and then a case where he lends him money, he's a shomer chinam, he's an unpaid watchman. Well, now we're saying that the whole Mishnah is arguing with Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says that the one who lends out money, that even if he lends out money, he's a paid watchman. So if that's the case, Rabbi Akiva, we've now established that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. We've now established that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. So because Rabbi Akiva says he's always a shomer. Rabbi Akiva says he's a shomer sachar, and the problem is that Rabbi Akiva, we know, we've established in the Gemara and Sanhedrin that all of the anonymous Mishnahs, generally speaking, follow Rabbi Meir, and we know that Rabbi Meir was a student of Rabbi Akiva, so we don't want to say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. So therefore, Varta must nisin to look Rabbi Eliezer. So it must be that our Mishnah, which says he's a shomer sachar, is arguing with Rabbi Eliezer, who says that the person who lends money on a mashkon is a shomer chinam. So the Gemara says, Lema b'delo shavi mashkon shir zuzi. So let's try and understand this. Let's try and understand this case that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, where they're arguing, Rabbi Eliezer says that he's a shomer chinam, and Rabbi Akiva says he's a shomer sachar. Let's say that they're arguing about a case where the mashkon was not worth the amount of the loan. Ubedeshmuel kamiflagi. And they're arguing about the ruling of Shmuel. Which ruling? The Amar Shmuel, that Shmuel taught, Haiman de uspa alfe zuze lechavre, va'anach lekata de magla ilayu. So let's say a person lent 1,000 zuz to his friend, and his friend gave him a collateral back, and the collateral was really insignificant. It was just the handle of a knife. Still, avad kata, the magla avdu alfe zuze. Still, under those circumstances, even if he loses just the handle of the knife, he's lost his 1,000 zuz. So let's say that that's the dispute, that's where there's the dispute. In that circumstance, there's the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Look at Rashi. The b'deshavi, because if it will be a case where the collateral reaches the value of the loan, then Rabbi Eliezer would admit that it was certainly the case that the collateral was intended to collect with. It's only about a case where the collateral did not reach the value of the loan. That under those circumstances where it does not reach the value of the loan, Rabbi Eliezer does not agree with the ruling of Shmuel, which is a problem for Shmuel. The Gemara doesn't put it that way, but that's saying Shmuel is arguing on Rabbi Eliezer, because Shmuel would say you lose the 1,000 zuz, and Shmuel was of the position that the collateral was meant for collection, whereas Rabbi Eliezer is of the position that you're a shomer chinam, meaning to say you just have the collateral to remind you of it. And so therefore, since it's not worth the value, it's just to remind you of the loan. And so therefore he's a shomer chinam. Whereas Rabbi Akiva agrees with Shmuel, and he says he accepted it as a collateral, and as long as he doesn't return it, he can't collect from it. So let's go back to the Gemara. Shmuel says, Gemara says no. If indeed the mashkon was not worth the amount of the loan, everybody would disagree with Shmuel and say that he does not lose the loan. Meaning, say even Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Eliezer says you don't lose anything, and Rabbi Akiva would say you only lose the value of the mashkon. Okay, you're a shomer sachar, but you lose just the value of the mashkon. Nobody agrees with Shmuel that you lose the whole value of the loan. But here we're talking about a case where the mashkon is equivalent to the value of the loan. And they argue about the position of Rabbi Yitzchak. What does Rabbi Yitzchak say? Rabbi Yitzchak's position is, and we had it several times already, that Rabbi Yitzchak said the position that the creditor has acquired the mashkon. He really owns the collateral, as it states in the pasuk, because the pasuk tells us that if you take as a collateral his pajamas, you have to return it to him at night, and in the morning you get his pajamas back as a collateral, and you take his day clothes. And it says in the Torah, that if you do this, it will be considered for you charity. Now, if you actually haven't acquired it, if you haven't actually acquired the collateral, why is it called charity? We see from here that the creditor has acquired the mashkon. So this is what we want to say, that this is the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva about whether or not that the creditor has acquired the mashkon. According to Rabbi Akiva, he has. According to Rabbi Eliezer, he has not. So when Rabbi Eliezer says that if you lend money on a mashkon, he says you haven't acquired it, and Rabbi Akiva says you have. Gemara says, "V'tizba, do you really want to say that?" Amar dama Rabbi Yitzchak b'mashkeno shelo b'shas halva'aso. When perhaps it's possible that when does Rabbi Yitzchak say you acquire the mashkon? That's if it's a mashkon not during the time of the loan. Meaning to say, under those circumstances, if he gave it to him later, which it was for sure for collection and not just to remind you of the loan, that's when he would say you acquired it. But during the time of the loan, maybe he agrees with Rabbi Eliezer there that it's just to remind you of it. Mi Amar. So the Gemara says, okay, new approach. If it was not during the time of the loan, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree with the position of Rabbi Yitzchak under those circumstances that it is that he's acquired the collateral. So here we're talking about is where it was the mashkon happened during the time of the loan. So there we know that it happened during the time of the loan, but b'shomer aveda kamiflagi. But they're arguing about whether or not they're arguing about the case of somebody who is watching a lost object. That's what they're arguing about. Meaning to say, what is the status of the shomer aveda? What's the status of the person who finds a lost object and he's and under those circumstances, we want to know about the person who's watching the lost object, what's his status and how that relates to here. The Imar, we learned, Shomer Aveda, a person who finds a lost object. Rabbah says he's like a Shomer Chinam, that the status of a person who finds a lost object, his status in watching it is like an unpaid watchman. Yeah, you find a watch on the street, nobody's paying you, you're an unpaid watchman. Whereas Rav Yosef says kishomer sachar. This is a position we had several times already. That Rav Yosef says if you find a watch on the street, you find something on the street, you're like a paid watchman. Why? Because of the pruta to Rav Yosef. Because during that time that you're watching it, you're actually getting a mitzvah and you're involved in a mitzvah. And so therefore, if some poor person comes to your door, you don't have to go to give the poor person the money. So therefore, you're making some money. So, since you'd be involved in the mitzvah, let's say lema the Rav Yosef Tanahi. So let's say that this position of Rav Yosef is actually a machlokas. This position of Rav Yosef by a shomer aveda, by a lost object. Let us say that is actually. Hold on one second. So Lema the Rav Yosef Tanahi. So let's say that this machokes of this position of Rav Yosef about whether or not we say if you're involved in the watching the lost object, it's like you're involved in a mitzvah. Let's say that's a machokes Tanayim about also watching a mashkon, because for sure this idea that Rabbah says that it's that you're a shomer chinam, that's for sure machokas tanaim, because Rabbi Kiva does not agree with Rabbah, and he says that you are a shomer sachar under those circumstances. But according to Rabbi Yosef, do we want to say that it's a machokas tanaim, that Rabbi Eliezer rejects the position of Rabbi Yosef? So the Gemara says maybe that's a dispute. The Gemara says no. Everybody agrees by finding a lost object. Everybody agrees with the position of Rav Yosef. Here we're arguing. We're on the top of 82b. Here we're only arguing about a case of where the lender requires the mashkon, meaning to say he wants to use the mashkon, and so therefore he's going to use the collateral to diminish his loan. Mar Savar. Mitzvah ka'aved shalvao v'aved shomer sachar. Rabbi Kiva's other position, since he's using it, he's basically performing a mitzvah, like Rav Yosef said, and so therefore he's a shomer sachar. So therefore he's a paid watchman. Umar safar, no. Boras Rabbi Eliezer's other position, since he's benefiting from it, lav mitzvah ka'aved. Since he's benefiting it, he's not getting that mitzvah. He's using the collateral. And therefore he's an unpaid watchman. And so therefore he's an unpaid watchman at that time. Abashol says, Mutar wa Adam askir mashkona shalani lios poches v'hoech. So Abashol is of the position that person is allowed to rent out his collateral of a poor person that he gave him in order to diminish the debt. Amar Avchanan bar Ami Amar Shmuel. Halacha Abba Shmuel. And the law is like Abba Shaul, V'af Abba Shaul, Lo Amar El B'maro Pasal V'kardum. Even Abba Shaul, who says that you're allowed to do this because you're basically helping out the poor person who lends you money, he only says it by certain utensils, by like the hoe or the axe or the plane. Ho v'nafish agrayu. Since you can rent it out for a lot of money, v'zutor pechatayu, and the depreciation is very little. Up to the next Mishnah. Let's say you're moving a barrel to basically what's going on is that you have a porter and his job is to move the barrel from one place to another. You have a moving company, Vishavra, and the barrel breaks. Bein shomer chinam, bein shomer sachar, whether he's a paid watchman or an unpaid watchman, Ishava, he has to take an oath that he was not negligent. And as a result of that, the Tanakama says he'll be exempt from having to pay. The Gemara is going to explain why, if he was being paid, he should swear that he's not negligent. So it's like he was being paid. So the Gemara is going, So why is he exempt as long as he's not negligent? Whereas Rabbi Elazar is of the position, Zeh v'zeh yishava. Rabbi Elazar says both of them need to swear. V'tamiani im yicholin zeh v'zeh yishava. Says, basically Rabbi Elazar is saying, I also heard from my teacher, Rabbi Meir, that both of them have to swear, but I don't understand how they could be exempt with an oath. And the Gemara is going to explain Rabbi Elazar's shock. Tana Rabbanim. First we start with a brisa. Amavir. So you're bringing the barrel from one place to another. And it breaks. So that we have a three-way dispute here. The position of Rabbi Meir is doesn't matter if you're paid or unpaid. You swear that you were not negligent and you're exempt. Rabbi Yehuda says shomer chinam yishaveh. Rabbi Yehuda says if the unpaid watchman takes an oath and he's exempt, no, say sachar yishalim. Whereas the one who is paid, he has to take an oath. He can't swear that he wasn't negligent. He just has to pay. Whereas Rebbe Elazar is on the position, Zev is Yishav. Rebbe Elazar is on the position that they both take an oath. But he says, I don't understand how they could both take an oath. So the Gemara says, okay, well, Meimra, so we see it's a three-way dispute. Rabbi Meir says they take an oath, they're both exempt. Rabbi Yehuda says the unpaid watchman takes an oath, but not the paid watchman. And Rabbi Elazar says, I know that they take an oath, but I don't understand why. Remember, the Sava Rabbi Meir, so it must be that Rabbi Meir says that they both take an oath because he's of the position, Nisko Lav Posheahu, that if he slips, because that's what happened, that if the person carrying the barrel slips, he's not going to take an oath because he was not negligent. And so therefore, the person who was paid, it's considered to be a total accident, and so therefore he's exempt. So not only is he not a form of negligence, it's also a form of a total accident. Mara says, how could that be the case? We have a brisa that argues with that. The brisa says, Nishbra kado below soko. Let's say his barrel broke, and this comes from the brisa in Bava Kama, that it says, that if the barrel breaks and he didn't move it, nafla gamalo below hemid, or if the camel falls and he doesn't stand him up, or Meir Mechayev, or Meir says he's responsible, Pezik, he's responsible for the damage. Chum say he's exempt from the laws of man, but he's liable for heaven. So the Kaimelon, and we say that what's the argument between Meir and the Chachamim there? The beniskal poshea pligi, that in the case where it's flipped, do we view that as negligence or as a total accident? So Rabbi Meir is saying that we view it not as an accident, as your negligence, and so therefore you're responsible for your barrel. So in the brisa of Bava Kama, Rabbi Meir is saying we view slipping as your fault, whereas in the brisa here we're saying slipping is a total accident. So the Gemara says, how do we deal with this problem? Amar Rabbi Elazar Tavra. We have to say it's impossible to dovetail the two sources according to the position of Rabbi Meir, so we have to break it. Misha Shanazu, Lo Shanazu. Two different teachers who are recording the tradition of Rabbi Meir, not the same person. So now we go to the next clause of the bride. So Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Meir, and he says not that they both take an oath. He says only the Shomer Chinam is going to take an oath. So he says that it is going to be viewed as not negligence, but just like Geneva Vaveda, like loss and theft. So the Shomer Chinam is exempt, but not the one who pays the money. So Hai Kidina V'Hai Kidina, meaning to say each one goes according to the law. The Shomer Chinam and the Shomer Sacha go according to their law. But also Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Eliezer comes along and say, yes, indeed, Gemara Rabbi Meir. The tradition and the teaching is like Rabbi Meir, that they both would be exempt if they slipped. He says, but I don't know how they can both take an oath. I understand how the unpaid watchman could take an oath to go pashaba that he wasn't negligent. El Shomer Sachar, but the paid watchman, Amay Mishtaba, why does he have to take an oath? Kilo Pasha Nami Shlume Bai. Even if he wasn't negligent, he should also have to pay because it's not a total accident. So the paid watchman typically would pay for that. And even the unpaid watchman also. Nami Atenach b'makom madron. I understand if he slips, if it was like on a hill or something. How could he take it if it wasn't a hill? How can he take an oath that he wasn't negligent? For sure, that would be considered a form of negligence. And even if on top of 83A, and even if it was like a diagonal hill, Nami, we could also say, we could say the following. Granted, we could say, even if it's like a hill, we could say he takes an oath that he wasn't negligent. That's where there is no witnesses. But if there are witnesses, Nasi Raya v'niftar, it's in public. Let him, check the security cameras, and they'll be exempt. Tan Yisabi Yehuda Omer, Ein Roesh Vuas Hashem Tia Bein B'neim. If there is Bein Shneim, that if there's no witnesses, then they take an oath. Hayesh Roy Yavi Raya v'pat there. But if there's witnesses, let him bring a proof, and I'll be exempt. Rechia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore, for this reason, how do we explain the contradiction between Rabbi Meir in the Brisa over here, which says that they take an oath, and the Brisa in Bava Kama where he says that they are negligent and they don't take an oath, that they're responsible. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, that really we're going to say that the fact that Rabbi Meir says you could take an oath that you slipped, that you weren't negligent, this is just a takana of the Chachamim. This is just a reform of the rabbis. That really slipping should be viewed as a form of negligence. But we allow you to take the oath that you slipped. Why? Otherwise, nobody would ever move a barrel from one place to another. And so therefore, they'd be concerned that the exposure is too high. So if that's the case, what are you supposed to take an oath? You were negligent. So how do you take this oath in this case? You have to take an oath that you weren't intentionally negligent. So that will stop here. I want to just say a happy birthday to my father, a happy birthday.